If you had a Venn diagram and a Joe in the middle of it, you'd have about 7 or 8 different circles around him. And that's purely because of his personality.
Everyone just clicked with him straight away. He was very outgoing, loving, very loving person.
He was essentially the kindest person I know, and the fact that someone could do this to him, that someone hurt him to hurt him, it just felt like the world had fallen out.
He was my life, and we had a tremendous bond, and it's gone.
It's just been horrific, and then every step has just got worse and worse and worse. We just need some peace, and if this doesn't get sorted out, it's going to be there forever.
Someone knows something. Someone, how they can live with themselves, knowing what they know and still carry on living like they do.
Today our case brings us to Swinford in County Mayo. It is located just off the N5 road and located 18 kilometres from Knock Airport. It is a former market town situated on a tributary of the famous River Moy. The town is renowned for its fishing waters, in particular the Callow Lakes, which yield excellent brown trout. Mayo County is in the province of Connacht and is also home to Gaelic football. It competes in 3 major annual inter-county competitions: the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship, the Connacht Senior Football Championship and the National Football League. On the 12th of August 2017, a murder would take place in a townland outside Swinford called Gortnacilla. People in the area would close ranks and hold a secret to this terrible murder nearly 6 years later. This is a video I wanted to make in the hopes of pulling people out from the shadows to bring this person or persons to justice. At the moment they would probably get manslaughter in this God-forsaken country, but at least the family would have answers as to what happened that night, and they could find some way of moving on. But for now they are stuck in limbo trying to find answers. From what I have read, the family are going nowhere, and the people of Mayo and London are going to keep searching for the truth. Joe Deacy was a 21-year-old chap from St Albans, Hertfordshire, London, England. By all accounts he was a man, but to his parents Adrian and Alison and his older sister Charlotte, he was still just a boy in their eyes. He was 3rd generation Irish. His grandparents were from Mayo on his father's side. While his accent might have been a giveaway, other than that you'd never know he wasn't Irish. Joe was a proud Londoner, but his heart was in Ireland. To him, any excuse to come to Ireland was taken, especially when the Gaelic football season began, hoping one day Mayo would bring home the cup and he'd be there to witness it. He was a cheeky chap with a great big smile, as you can see, and I have a feeling he was very popular with the ladies when he came home to Ireland. I will say home, as I don't see Joe as someone who just visited. He had as many family and friends here as he did in London. Joe even went as far as applying for his Irish passport in 2017, which would arrive in the post not long after his death, which is just the saddest thing ever. Joe was an avid sportsman and played for St Columcille GAA club in St Albans in Hertfordshire, and it was his favourite thing to come to Ireland and support Mayo in the football, and I'm sure he brought back a few tips to his own team, because everyone knows the Irish are better at everything, especially when it comes to GAA. So in August 2017, Joe would take one of his many trips home to Ireland. He attended the Galway races and stayed with his cousin Michelle and her family. On Friday the 11th of August, Joe decided to meet up with some friends, and so his cousin dropped him at the bus stop and he headed to a little pub called Paddy's Bar in Kilshama outside with Swinford, in the back end of nowhere. Joe was to go home to his cousin's house that night, but phoned her and said he was going to stay at a friend's house at Gortnacilla instead. This friend was more of an acquaintance than anything else, and even less after what was to happen that night to poor Joe. The night was a good night, and when Joe and this other guy arrived back at his house, Joe was Snapchatting with his cousins and friends in London. The last communication anyone had with Joe was around 3:45 a.m. The video showed Joe inside the house, in high spirits, laughing and joking, but he was also being told to keep it down by the other guy, as his parents were home. What happened in the next hours will be a black hole of mystery that has not been solved to this day. Later that morning, on the 12th of August at 6:30 a.m, Joe would be found by a passing cyclist in the driveway of the home he was staying in. The occupants of the house were alerted, and calls were made to the emergency services and Swinford Garda station, and Joe was taken alone to Mayo University Hospital in Castlebar. Not one of the 3 occupants of the house went with Joe in the ambulance. When Joe arrived at the hospital, his cousin Dee, a nurse, was notified that he had been brought in. She immediately contacted her sister Michelle, who Joe had been staying with, and in turn Michelle contacted Joe's family in London. As Michelle was driving to the hospital, Dee would ring her again to say that Joe's condition had gotten worse and wasn't going to make it. This news was devastating to Michelle. When the Deacy family arrived at the hospital, they noticed Joe was only wearing boxer shorts in the ER. His outer clothes were missing, but he had been fully clothed when the paramedics arrived at the house. They are, to this day, uncertain what happened to Joe's clothes that he was wearing. Joe had injuries consistent with a bad beating or a car accident. He had a black eye, a gash on the left side of his face, and blood on his nose. At first the Gardaí said he had fallen, but Michelle checked his hands and he had no marks. Michelle expressed to the Gardaí at the hospital that she felt it was more than a fall, but the Gardaí said to her that the Gardaí on the scene were satisfied it was a bad fall. Mayo Hospital decided to move Joe to a hospital in Dublin, and he was airlifted to Beaumont. But they were not moving Joe to save him, as he was beyond saving. They needed to keep him alive, so his family could get there and hopefully agree to organ donation and say their last goodbyes. Joe's parents and sister arrived that Saturday afternoon, and Joe passed away the following day, Sunday the 13th of August, after donating his organs and saving 6 lives. In the space of 24 hours, the Deacy family's whole life was changed forever, and now they needed to find out why. On Monday, a post-mortem was conducted by then State Pathologist Mary Cassidy, and on Tuesday the liaison officer told the family that Joe had died from blunt force trauma, and they were now investigating a murder. The problem was that the Gardaí treated Joe's case as an accident. The scene had not been secured. Joe's clothes were not preserved. In fact, they were missing. Whether paramedics had cut them off when they were attending to him on scene or when he got to the hospital. With the 3 days delay, it gave the family of the house plenty of time to clean up, power wash the driveway and get rid of any evidence in the house. They also had 3 days to decide what they were going to say, which turned out when they were brought in for questioning was nothing. Each question put to them was no comment. In November 2017, 2 men were arrested in connection with the investigation and released without charge. The house was examined twice and nothing was found. You could safely say the Gardaí dropped the ball on this case as far as evidence. A file went to the DPP and they determined there was not enough evidence to charge anybody. By 2020, a completely different team of investigators were put on the case. As I said before, the Deacy family are now nearly 6 years down the road, and it hasn't been uneventful in their quest to get answers and justice for their beloved Joe. In fact, it has been an utter nightmare. Not only are they grieving for the loss of Joe, but they are dealing with pure degenerate locals from the area where Joe was murdered. After the first anniversary, a floral wreath forming the words "Justice for Joe" vanished within a week of being laid, along with pictures of Joe. Mayo County Council in 2019 instructed the family to remove the roadside memorials they had erected, citing a lack of planning permission and that they presented a visual distraction to passing motorists. This is surely a give me strength moment, as I know all over the country there are monuments put up on the side of the road by families that have lost loved ones through car accidents, and nothing is said by any county council, whether it be a permanent structure or a makeshift one. I mean, look at this monstrosity. This surely is not only a distraction, but an eyesore. Sorry to whoever this belongs to. When the Deacy family pointed out to the council that other families had erected similar memorials, they were told that they had received complaints over a 6-month period and it had to go. Joe's family also put up a banner with "Justice for Joe" at the bottom of the road, leading to where Joe's life was taken. This banner was the second banner that had been slashed and torn down as recently as the 5th of March this year. The family will not be deterred. In August 2022, Joe's sign was used as a dumping ground. So disrespectful. In my opinion, there are 3 people in Mayo that know what happened that night, and I understand a parent would protect their son or a wife would protect her husband, but there was no one to protect Joe that night. He was brutally beaten to death and left outside like a wounded animal to die. Did poor Joe get attacked in that house and crawl outside to escape his perpetrators, or was he thrown out there? Did they lie in their comfortable beds while Joe lay dying in their driveway, or were they too busy cleaning up the scene? Why did the Gardaí receive a wall of silence when they were interviewed? Why every year, when the Deacy family make a peaceful vigil to the place where Joe was killed, are there Gardaí present? The Deacy family do not need to be violent to get justice for Joe. Their presence is enough. Over time, we all know that loyalties change and lips get loose, and someone somewhere will tell. While we say someone knows the answers, we know exactly who has the answers. Why was there a private second post-mortem by someone from Mayo done on Joe, without the family's permission, and the findings not released to the family? Joe's uncle had been told by a local that it was time to move on, that they weren't going to get the truth. The family on the first anniversary of Joe's death had a memorial football match, the Hammers against St Albans. The Hammers consisted of family and friends of Joe's in Mayo, and Joe's team from Hertfordshire. The turnout locally was very poor, and so this spurred on a local woman to stand up and make it known that she supported what the Deacy family were trying to do. She started an online campaign. She was disgusted that the friends Joe was out with that night and people from the townland surrounding Gortnacilla were not there to support Joe and his family. This woman has had visitors to her house trying to silence her and asked does she know what she is doing and is she sure she's doing the right thing. Her reply is yes. Mayo is known as a proud county, and this murder has cast a stain, and it has only taken a few people staying silent to do this. Joe was not a visitor, he was a proud Mayo man in his heart that loved Ireland, and it was like a second home to him. Not only has Ireland let him down, but more importantly East Mayo has let him down. It is only because of the dedication of Joe's family and friends that he has not been forgotten. Is the mentality in this day and age still a case of the Valley of the Squinting Windows? For anyone who are not familiar with this old Irish phrase, it basically refers to how we are all watching one another, or that's how it is or how we perceive it. That the community is so closely intertwined, it is hard for people to speak out against each other. And in this particular case, as soon as you speak out, you draw unwanted attention on yourself, and you become the one who broke the silence. We have to do better. We need to break our silence and bring all this to an end. The family are facing another anniversary this year, and hopefully in May, with more information, an inquest can be held and the people that know what happened will be made talk and answer questions as to what happened poor Joe that night, especially those 3 people that were in the house with Joe. If justice doesn't get you, I guarantee you karma will. Joe's mother, Alison, remembers him as a child with his halo of blonde hair. His father remembers the times when it was just Joe and him living together in the house, and he found it very hard to return to that house after Joe died. Charlotte remembers her little brother, who would find the things she found funny also, and no one else would. She doesn't have that anymore. His family in Galway and Mayo still must live among the people that know what happened to Joe and watch them be free and not pay for what they have done. It must be so hard and frustrating. So people of Mayo, I implore you, do the right thing and bring this person or persons to justice.